Hello and welcome to the studio. My name is Jon Bernstein. We're going to talk about edge computing for the next several minutes. Data everywhere, but is the edge what we think it is? Chris Dando, is the edge what we think of it? What does it mean to HPE and to you?
So I think the edge is changing, and it's not a single place. So I think historically, if we thought about enterprises, you thought about the edge as being potentially the retail store, you thought about it being the hospital, you thought about it being the manufacturing site. I think we're thinking about the edge of the future is much more distributed, and it could be in people's homes. They could be part of the edge. It can be on devices that move around, so it could be the car, the airplane, and so forth. And consequently, I think it's coming to terms with some of the impact of having data right out there at the edge that is business critical now is where the evolution of technology is going towards.
Very good, Chris. Thanks very much. Christina Finlay, the edge. What does the edge mean to you and your organisation? Is it one for the future or one for now?
Yeah, it's definitely one for the future. I mean, for me, I'm listening. I will be listening to what others are saying and how others are using it to see if it's relevant for what Nest needs, for what a government pension company might need in the future, and how we understand our customers and our investments.
Very good. Simon White, from a construction point of view, the edge. What does it mean to your organisation?
So I think simply for us, it is one for the future. But it's really, I think, how we can link it into digital twins. That's a kind of a buzzword that we've got around the industry. And I think it will really give benefit when we've got really clean processes and we've got digital twins that you can do predictive analytics on and get information at your fingertips. But I think we're a little bit away from it right now.
Very good. The same question to you, Martyn Wallace, from a local government point of view.
I think the Edge is a great guitarist, but no Van Halen. No, seriously, I think that there's plenty of opportunity. You know, we've kind of looked at it from maybe an IoT or health point of view for digital telecare. I'm the senior responsible officer for the changeover in Scotland. So there's plenty of opportunity for it to actually give that real-time analysis and data to make business decisions quicker, especially for environmental impact when we've got IoT devices in towns and cities. But more importantly, I see a big role for it in healthcare and how we deliver health services in the UK, or dare I say Scotland specific.
Very good, Martyn. Thanks very much. Chris, I want to talk about the business benefits with everybody in a second, but just so we're all on the same page, in terms of that definition of what the edge is, I know some definitions vary. My understanding is it's really about putting the computation, the storage, as close to the data source as possible.
So close to the data source and doing, to a certain extent, performing some analysis on the data at the edge, rather than trying to send everything back to the center. There are reasons why you can't always do that, whether it be the volume of data, whether it be the speed of communications, the reliability, or the ability to do communications over those long distances means that you need to have some processing at the edge for the sorts of data that we're analysing nowadays.
And from your perspective, internally maybe, but talking to customers, observing customers, what's working and what's not working?
Yeah, so I think we need to think this as being a step change in the technologies and the way that we manage it. So we've got the technologies that can help at the edge, but if we think about the edge, it is likely to be a more hostile environment than it is in a data center, in the cloud, in the central environment. You've got to think about the environmental requirements. How do you manage a distributed infrastructure rather than just deploy and forget about it? And you also need to think about how do you get data back to the center when you need to.
Very good. Martyn, can I come back to you and just thinking about making the business case for edge computing? There's a danger that we become very technical and get lost in the weeds about this, but making the case to, I guess, the CEO and the CFO, how do you make that case?
I think it's going back to, there's a phrase that's going to be printed on T-shirts or on my tombstone I've used many times working in public sector for the last 6 years, has been human by default and technology and data by design, not the other way around. So if we look at edge computing, there's an opportunity there for rural communities to be able to do community-based and place-based architecture of services around the intervention for the communities and the people, which could require edge-based computing to actually make that decision better, because as a friend in the studio said, that trying to get that link back to centre is going to be much, much harder, especially for rural. So that helps with the likes of Highlands and Islands in Scotland, Wales and colleagues in Cornwall and Devon as well, but not necessarily have the technical infrastructure like 5G or super fast broadband or fibre to get back to base to do that computational analysis that we need to do to improve outcomes.
Human by default. Finish that off for me.
Human by default, technology and data by design.
Very good. Martyn, thanks very much. Simon, the same question in terms of translating the technology and the potential of the technology into something that means something to the CEO and the CFO.
So I think putting on from what Martyn said, our company vision is powered by data, driven by people. And I think that the technology is an enabler, but the people add the value, and the people with the experience always will add the value, possibly until we get to AI. But basically, that is how we show the value back to the business. So aggregating all of those different data sources. And I guess the point where we are at the minute is, what does real-time information look like? And do you need real-time information for different aspects of your business? And if you can get a refresh in 5 minutes or 10 minutes, is that enough? Or do you invest heavily in the edge where you need real-time data? So that's really the dilemma at the moment.
And Simon, to what extent is data central to your organization?
I think we have, at the moment, we've got corporate data, and then we've got operational data, and we've got all different sort of levels of data, which are, ultimately they're entered by a human into computer systems. So from our point of view, it's really aggregating that data in certified data sets, and then we use Power BI basically to visualize that to the business. So we're changing the terminologies, if you like, the understandings of the board, that they're talking about data as an everyday aspect. They're talking about certified data sets, and it's really changing that culture. And that's where we're starting to get the value, where people are asking for it, and then the technology can deliver it for them.
Simon, thanks very much. Christina, that same question about making the case, the business case.
Yeah, I think for me, and we've all kind of, it sounds like we're in a similar place with, for us, we're implementing human-centered design, and we see data and technology as an enabler of how do we ensure that we're getting better member outcomes. Our members are in the lower income levels of society, and so how do we actually create a lot of value? When we're thinking about investment in technology, it's proof of concept is the best way for us to build a business case, is to try a small slice, to try a small test of, is this going to work, kind of, if we're looking at how we bring in different kind of investment sources of information, what's the best way for us to do that? Absolutely, with some kind of proof of concept where we say, actually the investment is worth the added benefit to our members and their pension pots.
And to what extent, similar question that I asked Simon, in terms of data being instrumental to your organization, to what extent is it instrumental?
Yeah, in certain areas, I would say, similar to most organizations, in pockets, it's amazing, and we could not function without data. In other areas, it's much more intuitive, and we're working on best practice. So definitely, I would say, inconsistent right now across the organization.
A final question, and Christina, I'll stay with you for this final question that I'll ask all of you in terms of unifying data across the organization, which I'm guessing is a universal objective. From your perspective, what needs to happen?
I think one of the things that I find actually is that technology is moving much faster than the people in the business are able to kind of absorb and work with. So for me, there's something about the storytelling, or how do you take all of this data and turn it into insight, and spend much more time turning that into insight that makes it really simple for the organization to know what to do. So when I think about, I say, we've got pockets of the organization that's really data literate and really running on data, other pockets that's not. For me, it's those pockets that's not, and the way to get them working on all these different data sources that we have is genuinely to say, actually, here's the insight, here's the action you need to take. And that is back to being quite a human thing that we need to invest some more time in, so that we get the organization working across the board.
So in terms of a barrier that you're facing, that's a cultural barrier you need to overcome rather than a technology barrier?
Yeah, I would say it's a cultural barrier. It's a cultural shift to genuinely see that it's not just subject matter expertise, but actually the data brings an objective point of view.
Very good. Christina, thanks very much. And Simon, how do we bring the disparate bits of data together in the organization?
So I think, again, from our point of view, we're probably 50% of the way through our data transformation at the moment. And part of it is the technology side. As an example, 2 years ago, we didn't have a single Power BI license in our business. We then went up to about 700 users and then back down to a kind of a corporate approach to it. And the things that we've really learned is the technology is there and getting better, but it's about data trust. If the business cannot trust the data, then you don't get the utilization of that data, and then they create their own data, which is kind of off system. So data trust is the first thing. And when you build a report, whether it's Power BI or any other system, the first report you've got to build is a certified data report that says this data is clean and it's correct, and then people trust it. And then you've really got to build that skill within your own business. So we don't have a centralized data team for building reports. We have created a network of people where in someone's particular area of the business, they've got to upskill, they've got to own the data, they've got to build their own reports. And we're probably, as I say, 50% of the way through that. It's been extremely successful to date, but it's not easy. It takes a lot of hard work, and it takes partnership between the business and IT.
And just briefly, the rationale behind having that network rather than a centralized data operation.
In my experience in the past, as an example, we probably have 2,000 reports, 2,000 automated reports running in the business. If I was to centralize that as a team to manage that, it would be inefficient, and it's also going to be a blocker on innovation. So basically, having networks of people who do it themselves around the business, it gives you the governance which you need, but it also improves innovation, and it also allows people across the business to connect with their data instead of having to come back to the center to say, give me access, do this for me.
Simon, perfect. Thank you very much. And again, Martyn, that core question about how do we get those disparate bits of data together? What are the barriers stopping us doing that?
I think it's a combination of different things. I think, as Christina said, culture is required to think and utilize with data, and skills required to actually being able to think and service design with data as well. You may not be aware, it was actually National Spreadsheet Day yesterday, which fills me with absolute horror. I think we should table that to be removed if you think that your business runs on an Excel spreadsheet. God forbid that that's the case. But I think, I've got an acronym of ACE, which I've been, helping with chief execs and CMTs, corporate management teams across councils about. Is ACE is the assets. What assets do you actually have? Where are the data assets? Common platforms such as Microsoft 365 and the Power Apps element of it, with your own dataverse underneath that to be able to tap into, to create Power Apps, etc., and to extract data from your day-to-day operations. So that's the assets piece. The C is the customer. What's the customer requiring? What reports need to do in the customer? Where's the customer's data experience and data expertise? And E is the employee. Is the employee, are they sufficiently skilled up to think with data? We jump on the ship of, we need a data scientist. Data scientists are very, very expensive. We need a data analyst. We cannot get them across public sector of Scotland because we're just priced out the market. And the corporates and the fintechs and the emerging innovations of the Central Belt in Scotland are absorbing these types of roles. So we need to make sure it's everybody's business to think with data, but that requires that cultural and skills piece. So ACE is the model: assets, customer, and employee to actually help that fix it and sort it.
And Martyn, from your experience at working in government, local government, are you pushing at an open door when it comes to the use of data, or is it more complicated than that?
We've always used data, right? Ministers use data, as we know, and statistics, and you can put in what you think about that in the back of that as well. But we absorb and we create so much amounts of data, but is it relevant? During the COVID pandemic, we had a cottage industry in reporting of where things were happening in communities and stuff, but was it effective? So we have actually got national projects across all 32 local authorities about a national data returns platform. How do we help remove that kind of cottage industry that's been set up of reporting for reporting's sake, but how does it actually create impact on the data that's being collected, and how do we actually think with data? So I think there is an open door there. I think it's just that nervousness in terms of that culture and skills that has to be helped supported, and that's what the digital office, my office, is there to help and support and deliver.
Martyn, thanks very much. And Chris, that same core question that I asked the others in terms of barriers to bringing that disparate bits of data together?
Yeah, so I think we also need to start thinking about beyond the traditional structured data. So, typically that's where businesses, organisations have historically run their businesses based on structured data. What we're seeing now is more and more business decisions being taken based on the unstructured data, so the images, the sensor-generated data, the video type data, and so forth. And you think about how that might apply to many industries, whether it be airports or football stadiums or in healthcare and so forth. So actually, it's connecting the data together regardless of the data type. So actually looking at it across the whole of the organisation, regardless of whether it's structured, unstructured, streaming, video type data, and so forth. But I'd also take it one step further. We're seeing connections, much more connections from an information perspective and a data perspective between industries. So how do you actually share it on a whole life cycle basis? So how do you secure it? How do you anonymize it? How do you not share the sensitive parts, but how do you actually share information between separate entities rather than just think about it within the enterprises all the time?
And I suppose that reference to the unstructured data kind of neatly brings us back to edge. And just before we go, just make the case, a very brief case for edge computing to those that are still thinking about it.
Yeah. So look, I think if you're in a large location, quite often you find multiple separate organisations in those, whether that be ports, whether it be in malls, whether it be in a hospital type environment. You're trying to cover all sorts, multiple different support type activities, but you need to have some level of autonomy to run those regardless of whether the communications links are up. At the most extreme environment, we put a supercomputer into space. The amount of time that it takes to transfer data on a round trip basis for that, makes it, you've got to be very careful about what it is that you share back to the center and actually do the processing at the edge. And that's the key, is the speed with which you can make decisions on things if you've got the computing power at the edge can be quicker than if you're sending all the data to the center.
Chris, thank you very much. Martyn and Simon, Christina, thank you all very much for your time. Thank you all for watching.